Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Our Parsha, this Shabbat, I already told you earlier, was anyone paying attention? It is Shelach. And it is famous for the story of the 12 spies. There is also a section on Shabbat, how we treat the strangers, and actually the tzitzit that we wear. The tzitzit are on the four corners of the garment of our prayer shawl. This represents the four corners of the world, so that wherever we go, we know that God is with us. In some instances, you will find a blue thread, and that is what's in this parsha, which we'll have a little moment of discussion of that in the sermon. But those are sometimes difficult to find, but they are quite holy when they have the blue thread. And all of the knots add up on all four corners to the 613 commandments we have, not just 10. 613 commandments, thou shalt do something, thou shalt not do something. So all of this is discussed in part of this parsha. But we're going to cover the spies. So as the big spy story goes, God promised a land that we were meant to grow and prosper in. When that actual land was before the Israelites, Moses then sent 12 spies to investigate and report back on things that they might have seen. What did the land look like? How was it populated? What was the population? What were the people like? How many were there actually there? Was it going to be possible to actually come in and conquer that land? And then what's the condition for farming and tilling the soil? How would it be for grazing, for cattle? What would this actually look like? But most importantly, Moses said, remain positive. He actually told them to go inside that land, take a look around, but remain positive. Well, quite the opposite happened. They were not positive. They were as far away from positive as you could get. They were the completely opposite extreme. They had so little faith in God and God's plan for us that they basically blasphemed God, slandered God and the entire mission, turning the entire group of Israelites against the plan, God's plan for us, told to Abraham. They got them all to get in an uproar and to not want it. Infusing fear in the inability to take the land and actually enjoy what had been promised and destined. Even though 2 people reported positively, Joshua and Caleb, all the other 10 spies were convinced that this was not the right plan, dissuaded everyone with their negativity, their fear, and creating a sense of mob psychology. Have you ever experienced anything like this, or heard of anything like this, or seen anything like this go on? Look at January 6th. I don't get into politics on Bema, but groups can be persuaded to do things, and one person, may not even be the leader, can take charge and create a mob to have very passionate feelings about something. So this plan had been set out, and these 10 individuals, number 10 equals God. 2, as we said with the bet, is partnership. 12, add them together, 2 and 1, 3. What do we say about the number 3? Creates order out of the chaos. They were meant to go forward and create order out of the chaos, but they were so bad. God had had enough. Enough is enough. He said, that's it. They're not getting in. None of them are getting in. And Moses was really upset. God wanted to wipe everybody out. And as was the pattern that Moshe had to deal with as time went on, he was constantly pleading with God on our behalf to please excuse our behavior. So what happened as a result is that none of the Israelites of that generation, except the 2 who stood up, that interceded on God's behalf, all of them did not get in. That generation did not get into the promised land. Not until that generation was to die out. So my question to you is, how often Do you see something one particular way, and yet others see it completely different? Has anybody experienced that? So take a car accident, all right? Two people can see the exact same thing, but they can see it in very different ways. And the way they saw it is very true for them. Or what about in life and in families and relationships? Do you ever have an experience with someone where you know what happened, and the other person has a completely different, distorted reality of what happened? And you're like, no, that isn't what happened. Don't carry that with you. That's not how it went down. But they can't be shifted from that because that's their truth. That's what they experienced. That's what they saw. That's what they felt in their own being. So you can't shift them off of that. And so in a sense, if the 10 were afraid and scared and they came back with all that fear and negativity, they weren't going to be shifted. And they were so powerful in their negativity. The negativity, it goes at the light like a moth to a flame. And that's what happened. Now, these two individuals, Josh and Caleb, they were spared because they dared to speak up and not go along with the group that wanted to discourage everyone from moving ahead. Now, think about, have you ever been in a position where you had to be the one that stood up and said, this isn't right? No. Or have you been in a position where you had to keep quiet because it wasn't the right time to speak? And that's kind of what happens with Joshua and Caleb. So Rabbi Eliyahu Safran says about this, Yehoshua could never, Joshua, tolerate falsehood, not even for a moment. He would immediately and forcefully oppose anyone uttering such things. Caleb, however, possessed a different kind of spirit. He could lay low. He could bide his time. Therefore, he understood that he had to gird himself against the negativity and the falsehoods, and that the way he would do this was with his own personal prayer. In so doing, he actually provides a vital model for our own times. Despite the various walls that we erect to protect ourselves and those that we love from the influence of the outside, the spies, that presence, that negativity, that influence is always constant. We must turn to prayer to protect our inner selves from the lies and the filth that is swirling around us every day. Prayer and positivity keep us on the path forward. And once again, that was from Rabbi Eliyahu Safran. God guided us for so many years toward the land that we were about to enter. We had it right in front of us. But the spies' negative accounting was beyond the pale. So what happened? We wandered and wandered and wandered for 40 years. It didn't have to be that way. Rabbi Yitzhak Berkowitz notes that the spy story was actually merely a story of facts. The one question was how those facts would be interpreted. So something happened, there were the facts, 12 people saw it, 10 spies saw those facts in a very negative light. Now, you contrast this with tzitzit, and as I mentioned with the blue thread. In this parsha, Rashi notes that from the very simple fact of that one blue thread, one could see the high heavens. So the tzitzit in this parsha remind us of God's presence in this world, and the mitzvot, remember I said they're knotted up for the mitzvot that we are meant to live by. So I ask you, do we wish to strive for heaven, or do we want to be bogged down with negativity and despair? Do we want to destroy any chance of happiness and good health and abundance and moving forward toward a future and a destiny that is meant to be ours? Jewish journalist Stephen Genek states, how we see facts determines our level of happiness and frames how our relationship with God will be. One must just know one fact. All that the merciful one does, he does for our benefit. With this axiomatic truth, one can actually live a life of nirvana. So when we're actually told to move ahead, go forth, lech lecha, we are meant to do this with faith that God's got us. God's got our back. God's the safety net. We just have to go forward. We have to have faith. We have to not succumb to the negativity that's around us and inside of us. Whatever lies ahead, we should approach it with open minds and positivity, and know that God is always with us. The spies didn't do that. They were even told to be positive, but they were closed-minded, they were filled with fear, anxiety, and then chose to ruin it for everybody. There are people who will drag us down, no matter what. Do any of you know anybody like that? Has that ever happened to you? They will try to sway us toward their point of view. And in so doing, if we go into their point of view, their mindset, their psychology, their negativity, that can jeopardize not only our future, but everyone's future, because we're all dependent on one another. We all affect each other like a domino. And this is exactly what happened. Those two were open-minded, Joshua and Caleb. They were open-minded, they were positive, so they got to go into the promised land, because that is exactly what would be needed to embrace the beauty, the possibility, the abundance, but also to overcome the obstacles and, yes, any horrors that might occur. You have to be strong. You have to be positive. You have to know when to lay low and be quiet, and you have to know when to speak up and go forward. So in order to merit the promise that God wants for us, we need to have faith in the journey and God's plan. The plan that God has for every single human being on this planet. We need to look for truth, Emet, and remain open. Then the reward and the revelation will be ours to not only share with each other, but to pass on l'dor v'dor from generation to generation. And that is what our world needs now. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. God is love. God is inside of us. We are, as the stranger is mentioned in this parsha, we are meant to love another like ourselves. Do unto others as we would have done unto us. So we cannot succumb to the negativity and the monsters we fear. Our free will gives us the opportunity to color our world however we want to do it. We just have to rise above, trust in God, and push our way through to the light. As stated earlier, we just have to know one fact. All that the merciful one does, he or she does for our benefit. And with this axiomatic truth, one can live a life of nirvana. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will for all of us, God's plan for us, and may we remain open to what the future might bring. Shabbat Shalom.